Austria's hills are alive to the sound of claps at the emergence of its current Foreign Minister Sebastian Kurz as the country's next chancellor, and given that the leader of the centre-right People's Party is all of 31. He is going to be the youngest executive head of state in the world. The last of the postal votes are trickling in today, but projections have firmly placed Kurz's party on more than 30% and as the winner of the election. So what do we know about these developments in Vienna, and does this, as the Western media reports are indicating, really mean ultra-right-wing rule in Austria? Senior foreign editor Padma Rao breaks it down for us.
He's known as Wunderwutzi, or the Whiz Kid, and there's a reason that goes beyond his boyish looks, youthful energy and broad smile. The population of the tiny alpine country Austria is 8.7 million, which includes nearly 600,000 refugees. Austria has pursued a fairly liberal refugee policy, but ever since thousands of Syrians on the run from war began to seek shelter in Europe from 2015 onwards, right-wing rhetoric gained the upper hand, including and especially in Austria, which has served as a gateway to Germany for more than 1 million people. Sensing that public mood and the rise in popularity of the right wing, Sebastian Kurz repeatedly promised cutting benefits for all foreigners and keeping the European Union out of Austria's domestic affairs. That worked, and the country's current foreign minister, Sebastian Kurz, will soon be Austria's new executive head of state. But the ultra-right-wing Freedom Party of the country has been in a coalition with the Conservatives before, once in the mid-2000s. In this one, it's back at third place and will be the junior partner to Kurz's People's Party in a coalition again. But if Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Gustav Klimt were born in Austria, so was Adolf Hitler. Hardly a wonder then that the Western media has obsessed with and focused only on the extreme right wing, the third place winner, and not at the victory of the millennial Sebastian Kurz. Ahead of the election, the Freedom Party's Heinz Christian Strache had cleverly converted his renowned anti-Semitism into anti-Islam and even attempted to woo global Jewish leaders by dropping in on Israel and bowing his head at the Holocaust memorial, the Yad Vashem. It will take more than conciliatory words if Austria wants to remain in the good books of economically resurgent Big Brother Germany, where the right wing will be in the opposition, and Europe's second largest economy, France, too. Sebastian Kurz and Emmanuel Macron of France may share the looks, the age group, and even be fans of the same football club. The right-wing partner Strache is a strong critic of the EU, while Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel are avowed Eurocentrics. Incoming Chancellor Sebastian Kurz in Austria will have his task cut out. This young leader will have to use all his charm and keep his rabid junior partner, Heinz Christian Strache, on a very short leash. Padma Rao, Beyond.
And joining me now to discuss this further is our senior foreign editor, Padma Rao. Indeed, a fascinating story that's playing out in Austria, Padma.
Yes, absolutely, but not very surprising, Raghavendra, if you go by, the many decades over which Austria had a relatively liberal policy towards refugees. And I don't mean Syrian refugees or refugees from Islamic countries. There were, after the fall of the war, or just before the fall of the wall, the Berlin Wall, and before the end of the Cold War, Austria was a kind of transit point for many refugees from Eastern Europe, and they would arrive to a very warm welcome in Austria. And eventually many of them would make their way to the economic superpower, which is just north of Austria, that is Germany. So now that has all changed since 2015, and in Austria, as in Germany, in France, across Europe indeed, there has been a rise of populist right-wing rhetoric, specifically directed against refugees from the Middle East.
Absolutely. And since Kurz is now almost certain to be Chancellor of Austria, do you see it being a difficult road ahead for him? What will be his main challenges?
Well, up to now, his People's Party was ruling in a coalition with the Social Democrats, but that didn't go down too well with voters. You know, the economy was down and various other things began to be blamed on that coalition. Now it's an interesting situation because you have a repeat of an earlier coalition that Austria saw in the mid-2000s, that is between the centre-right People's Party of Sebastian Kurz and the Freedom Party, the so-called Freedom Party, which is the ultra-right wing of the leader by the name of Heinz Christian Strache. So what will happen is that I think Sebastian Kurz will have a balancing act to do. He will have to tone down the anti-EU rhetoric of practiced by Heinz Christian Strache, and he will have to find a common meeting ground with the European Union, especially over the point of admitting refugees. And as you know, tens of thousands continue to stream into Europe every day, and many of them will continue to arrive at Austria's doors, because that is the land route for people arriving who cut their way through Central Europe and Eastern Europe, rather, I beg your pardon. So I think Sebastian Kurz will have his task cut out for him. Let's not forget one final point, Raghavendra. In the mid-2000s, when there was a coalition between the extreme right wing and the centre-right, those were different years. The leader then was Jörg Haider, who was much very maligned, and people didn't like that kind of rhetoric at all those days. But that was well before the influx of refugees from the Middle East. So times have changed, things have changed, and overall in Europe, the right wing and the extreme right wing, as you know, is also in the opposition in Germany, has seen a resurgence. So there, you know, even the approach and that people, the ordinary, you know, voters are taking towards the right wing actually entering parliament has changed enormously since the mid-2000s, and certainly tremendously since the end of World War II, and which saw the terrible Holocaust.
Absolutely. And Padma, the fact that he's just 31 years old, he's going to be the head of a state at such a young age, probably the youngest ever head of the state in the world. Tell us a little about the man himself. What kind of a background does he come from, and what has his politics been so far?
Well, he's managed to, you know, make himself very, he's a very popular politician. He's, people I think are also, you know, Austria tends to be a very traditional-minded country, much more so than Germany, and it's not been very open to any kind of radical political change for a very long time, which is indeed why the last coalition lasted 10 years. But I think it's right now it's being swept by two things. One is the fact that, you know, Europe is increasingly in need of younger leaders to change things around, to change policies, to make them more up-to-date and to keep up to speed with what's happening in the rest of the world and indeed in the rest of the European Union. And as I said, we have very young leaders emerging not only in France but also in Germany, although albeit in the opposition currently. And I think that is a trend which makes Sebastian Kurz most attractive to the Austrian voter. But you know, as I said, time will tell whether he has the maturity at the age of 31 to keep his junior partner Heinz Christian Strache of the Freedom Party, the ultra-right wing, under control, and to tone down some of that rhetoric, because as you know, the stream of refugees has not stopped and isn't looking likely to stop in the near future either.